What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody had an amazing New Year's and an amazing Christmas and is ready to have a great 2025. I know I am. Not a big New Year's resolution person, but hell, I'm ready to get this year going. Enough about the future and the present. Let's go back to the 1990s, because we all know cars were amazing in the 90s, right? Bare bones sports cars that were reliable and dependable and had just enough technology to make them fun, and they're still very drivable today. The 90s was the best decade for Japanese sports cars. And I think it's time we revisit these cars. And yes, these cars have increased in popularity. They've gone up in value because a lot of them are hard to find in good shape, and they're old now. They're over 30 years old. These cars are getting up there in age. If you were a kid in the 90s, these were the sports cars to have. And remember, this is pre-Fast and the Furious. Everyone today thinks about Japanese sports cars and they think boy racer and they think Fast and the Furious, fart can exhaust, tacky body kits. If you forget about all that, these cars were really amazing in stock trim. What they delivered in the 90s was unlike anything else. And it was reliable, dependable, and very affordable. We're going to exclude the subcompact cars, some of the front-wheel drive cars, and the entry-level subcompact cars. Not that they don't deserve to be talked about, but we'll leave that for another video. The Mazda RX7. Beautiful design, lightweight car, rotary engine, the only rotary-powered car, which you either love or you hate. Not the most reliable of the bunch we're going to talk about today. Definitely has a lot of character, probably the most character here. Great car for the back roads. Timeless design. It's really hard to find good examples. A lot of them have been LS swapped because it's such a lightweight chassis, but the Mazda RX7 was definitely one of those cars. It did everything that the Miata didn't do. It gave you the rotary engine, it gave you more power, and took everything up a couple of notches from what the Miata was. There's the Nissan 300Z or 300ZX. They were ZX back then. The 300ZX was the last ZX. After that, it's just been Z, 350Z, 370Z, and now just Z. You had turbo power available, fully independent rear suspension, manual gearbox, a great looking car, timeless design, with headlights so cool that Lamborghini used the headlights on the Diablo, on the late model Diablos. Lamborghini didn't have time to design the headlights, so to save money, they borrowed the headlights from the 300ZX. You had the 3000 GT, and we'll include the Dodge Stealth too, because it has the Dodge name, but Mitsubishi designed the car, designed the engine, and Chrysler was just responsible for the exterior styling and putting the Dodge badge on there. Those cars were available in lots of different trim levels, both front-wheel drive on the lower trim models with 160-ish horsepower, RT trim level, the mid-tier 222 horsepower, which was also the same power available on the non-turbo 300Z and the non-turbo Supra, which back then, actually in the 90s, 222 horsepower in a V6 was, or an inline six, was a good amount of power. V6 in the Mitsubishi and the Nissan and the Supra, which we're going to get to in a minute, was the inline six. But anyway, lots of different trim levels. They had a removable hardtop convertible. They had a sophisticated all-wheel drive system for the time. Definitely a car that you really don't see too often today. Who has a 3000 GT or a VR4? Comment below. Or a Dodge Stealth. Never see the Stealth anymore. I always thought the Stealth was a good looking car, and I like the looks of the Stealth a little better than the 3000 GT when they came out. And of course, we've got to talk about the Toyota Supra, which clean examples have been going for astronomical amounts of money for the last 5 or 6 years. The Supra did everything well. You had turbo power, you had the manual gearbox, you had amazing tunability. These cars were bulletproof. I mean, people were boosting the hell out of them and making crazy numbers and smoking everything on the street back in the day. And unlike the pony cars of the era, the Supra could handle well too. It was great around turns. Great. All of these Japanese cars, where they really stood out from the American sports cars, aside from the Corvette, the pony cars, I would say, was that you had fully independent rear suspensions on these cars and could handle really well around turns. They didn't have the V8 power that the pony cars had, but they made up for it in true sports car fashion on the back roads. And the 2JZ GTE and the Supra is still legendary today, and it's one of the best sounding Japanese cars ever, in my opinion. You had the Skyline, the R33, R34 cars. I didn't really want to cover them because they weren't sold in the US market, so I wasn't exposed to them in the 90s. I heard about them later. We didn't have the internet back then, so it's not like it is today when a car is released in another market, you still get to see it online. So I wasn't exposed to those R34s until later, until the last decade recently, when you started seeing them coming over to the States. And if we're going to talk about Japanese sports cars, we have to talk about arguably the greatest true sports car that ever came out of Japan, the Acura and the Honda NSX. I don't know where to begin. This car was released in 1990 or 1991. You had a VTEC V6, you had an all-aluminum semi-monocoque. This car was lightweight, this car handled exceptionally well. In fact, legendary F1 driver Senna was responsible for the fine-tuning of the suspension. Some of the best handling cars out there. You had exotic Italian looks, but it was extremely reliable because we know the Ferraris from this era, the Lamborghinis from this era were not reliable. No, you didn't get the flat plane crank V8, the screaming V8, or a screaming V10 or V12, but you had Japanese reliability. This car was as reliable as a Honda Accord, and it was daily drivable too. This was the first supercar, and that's for another video. We can argue about whether or not it's a supercar or not, but it was the first true mid-engine sports car that was really reliable. The NSX really paved the way for the entry-level supercars that came later. Your Audi R8s, your Lamborghini Gallardo. If the NSX wasn't as successful as it was, we probably wouldn't have had all of these entry-level supercars. Because when the NSX came out, you had 911 turbos, you had Ferrari 348, the Lamborghini Jalpa was ending production. There was nothing really, you had nothing. The F355 came later. I mean, we only had a handful of supercars in those days. I just made a video about that, actually, about how rare it was to spot a supercar in the 90s. So rare, any of them. The elitists today will laugh at Japanese cars. They'll say the NSX is not a supercar, or the Lexus LFA isn't a hypercar, or whatever. But let me tell you, man, in the 90s when you spotted an NSX, it was really special. It was really special. For me, I remember the Toyota Supra as being the one. And this, again, mid-90s, long before the Fast and the Furious. And we just never saw the Supras. I would see 300ZXs. I saw a few people that had 300Zs. I saw plenty of Dodge Stealths and 3000 GTs. And I'd see RX7s here and there. But the Supra, you just wouldn't see those as often, at least from what I remember. And they really stood out back then, man. Such a cool design back then, in my opinion. And all of those cars today are still very drivable, still reliable, still a lot of fun. They may not be as fast in a straight line stock as your modern cars, but they have so much soul and they have so much character. And that's what's been lost today. With everything shifting towards EV, that's what's being lost. If all these cars didn't have the different power plants that they have and they were all just electric, it wouldn't be nearly as successful or nearly as cool as they are today. All that character and all that soul, unfortunately, is being lost, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with sports cars in the future. I want to stay positive, but it's kind of hard to stay positive. We hear about EV this and EV that, and even on your luxury and exotic makes, they're dropping V12s, dropping V8s, going to 6 cylinders. You know, when you buy a Ferrari, do you really want a 6-cylinder or a McLaren? No, you want the bigger engine because you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we will see, we will see. Every single one of those sports cars you could buy with a manual gearbox. It was a big deal back then to have a manual sports car, and it still is. It really puts you in tune with the car, especially a lightweight chassis, a nimble chassis, rolling through the gears, no computer aids, nothing to save you. There is just nothing like it, man. It's the best way to experience a true sports car is with the manual. And all of these cars were available in manuals. The automatic trims were just slush box 4 and 5 speed, slush box automatics. Actually, I believe they were all 4-speed autos. They were reliable and dependable, and you would get the styling of the car, just in an automatic. Not as fast as your PDK transmissions and your dual clutch transmissions of today, but that manual option, man, that is where it was. And in those days, it would have been hard to fathom sports cars without manual gearboxes. And it was pretty amazing when the GTR R35 came out, and that's when there was that turning point with the transmission. And then all of a sudden you had these dual clutch transmissions that were exceptionally fast and still fun, But in those days, it was an automatic was just a 4-speed slush box for soccer moms and for old people or people that were not car enthusiasts. And that's what the non-car enthusiasts don't understand, is we remember a time where we had all this character and all this soul and all these things that we could do to our cars. You know, we don't want everything to be the same and be boring, and maybe it's fast in a straight line, but who cares about that? We didn't get into sports cars strictly for straight line acceleration, especially straight line acceleration that is just point and shoot, where you don't have to control the car. You know, you get into old school drag racing and there's a lot that goes on. A lot that goes on with that, man. If you want to add to the conversation about any of these cars, if you're someone that owned any of these cars in the 90s or owns one or two of them today, please comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are. And if there's anyone that had a bad experience with any of these cars, whether it's reliability or just bad luck or whatever, please comment below, because you don't hear a lot about the bad experiences. You know, we look back and we want to think about all the good and forget the bad, but let's talk about the bad too. So I want to know your thoughts. Please comment below. Let us know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you next time.